It began on an ordinary Tuesday morning, the kind that felt like it had already happened 100 times before. The office was too bright, too quiet, filled with the low hum of air conditioning and the soft tapping of keyboards that all sounded the same. I had a cup of coffee that had gone cold, a half-finished report open on my screen, and that familiar feeling that I was once again doing something important that no one would ever notice. My name is Anna Lopez, 46 years old, a senior marketing analyst, and I've been with this company for 12 years. I used to think experience would buy you respect. Now I know it just buys you silence. That morning, an email arrived. The subject line read, Q3 compensation file, final for management review. I wasn't management, but my name sat there on the CC list, quiet, unassuming, like a mistake no one would ever bother to fix. I stared at it for a moment, then clicked. The spreadsheet opened, rows of names and numbers stacked in tidy confidence. It looked ordinary, harmless even, the kind of file I'd opened 1,000 times. But somewhere in that grid was a truth I wasn't supposed to see. I scrolled until I found my name, $68,000. Then I kept scrolling. Jason, same title, same clients, 3 years less experience. His number, $83,000. For a second, I didn't move. It wasn't anger, not the kind that makes you shout or slam your desk. It was colder than that, quieter, like a fog that settles and refuses to lift. I checked the columns again. Departments, performance bands, review notes, all identical. The only difference was the number that decided how much we were worth. The printer hummed behind me. Someone laughed near the break room. My manager's voice floated over the cubicles, cheerful and detached. The world around me kept moving as if nothing had happened, as if fairness were just another forgotten policy in the employee handbook. I closed the file and looked at my reflection in the dark screen. The face looking back at me was calm, steady, practiced. 12 years of keeping it that way. 12 years of making peace with being overlooked. But something shifted that morning. Not a scream, not a scene, just a click somewhere inside me. I opened my drawer and took out the small black notebook I'd kept for years. The leather was soft from use, the corners bent, the pages lined with traces of thoughts I'd never said out loud. It used to hold client notes and creative ideas. That day, it began holding evidence. On a clean page, I wrote 2 lines, 68,000 and 83,000, and beneath them, one word, why? The ink spread slowly into the paper fibers, dark and deliberate. I stared at it for a long time. It didn't look like a question. It looked like a beginning. That night, I lay awake listening to the quiet. My mind kept replaying the numbers, steady even, unchanging. 68, 83, 68, 83. Not loud. Not angry. Just precise. It wasn't about the money. It was about something deeper. The moment you finally realize that silence isn't peace. It's proof waiting to be used. And that was the night I stopped mistaking calm for fairness. The weeks that followed felt different, even though nothing had changed. The office still smelled like burnt coffee and recycled air. The same jokes floated across the same cubicles. Jason still said teamwork in every meeting, and people still nodded like it meant something. But beneath all of it, I felt a quiet vibration, like the floor had started to hum beneath my chair. I began writing more in the notebook. Not just numbers this time. Conversations, dates, comments. Little things that didn't seem to matter but always left a mark. We'll revisit your promotion next quarter. You're such a steady hand. Anna, we can always count on you. Words that sounded like compliments but landed like chains. Every Friday before I left, I'd open the drawer, take out the notebook, and write down one sentence from that week that didn't sit right. Sometimes it was something said in a meeting. Sometimes it was what wasn't said at all. He presented my report. She took my line from the pitch. They called it mentoring. It felt like erasing. It became a habit, quiet and precise. No anger, just documentation. I told myself it wasn't revenge, it was record-keeping. Because if there's one thing 12 years in marketing had taught me, it's that data speaks louder than emotion. By the third week, the notebook had started to fill. The ink bled faintly through the pages, and the spine made a soft cracking sound whenever I opened it. It felt alive, almost, as if the pages were breathing with me, holding every moment I couldn't say out loud. One morning, in the middle of a strategy call, I watched Jason present one of my decks. The same layout, the same phrasing, even the same typo in slide 7. I'd built it over 3 late nights, and now it had his name on the title page. When he finished, the room applauded. I smiled, because that's what I was trained to do. But under the table, my hand tightened on the edge of my notebook. That afternoon, I wrote a new entry. He speaks, I build. It became my rhythm. Work, watch, write. I noticed everything. Who got credit, who got silence, who got to interrupt without consequence. Patterns emerged clear and ugly. I didn't need to ask why anymore. The notebook was answering for me. By the end of the month, I'd written 36 entries. Not dramatic stories, just facts. Clean, dated, undeniable. The kind of details that no one pays attention to until they're all lined up in one place. And one night, as I read through those pages, I realized something. I wasn't just recording the company. I was recording myself, the version of me that had learned to stay small so others could feel tall. That realization didn't feel bitter. It felt measured, like something solid forming beneath my calm, because when people underestimate you long enough, they forget that quiet can be dangerous too. The break didn't come with yelling or doors slamming. It came with applause, the kind that fills a room but empties something inside you. It was a Thursday afternoon, quarterly results presentation. The kind of meeting where people rehearse their smiles more than their slides. The conference room smelled like fresh markers and ambition. I was there early, setting up charts, checking formatting, adjusting every margin like it mattered. When the directors walked in, Jason was already at the front of the room, talking. My slides were on the screen. My data, my words. Even the color scheme I'd stayed up until midnight perfecting. Only one thing was missing. My name. I watched from my seat, second row, center, the position that used to mean trusted. He was saying everything I'd written, word for word, just louder. The head of the department nodded, impressed. Someone clapped before he even finished the summary. I felt a strange stillness settle over me, like gravity had changed direction. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I just felt cold and clear. When he wrapped up, my manager turned to him and said, "Brilliant work, Jason. This is exactly the kind of clarity we need." Then, as if out of habit, he looked at me and smiled. "Anna, thanks for helping him polish the data." Helping him. The words landed softly like a feather made of glass. No sound, just the crack that comes after. Around me, people started packing their notes, chatting, congratulating him. I closed my laptop slowly, carefully, as if every movement had weight now. And in that quiet, something inside me finally aligned. Not broke, not bent, just clicked into place. After the meeting, Jason came over. He looked awkward, like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. "Hey, Anna," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "I hope you didn't mind that I used your format." "You're just so good at making things clear," I smiled. "Clarity's my job," I said. He grinned, relieved, and left. I sat there for a moment longer, alone in the room that still smelled like coffee and projection heat. Then I opened my notebook, new page, clean, white, waiting. I wrote the date. Then a single line. He spoke my work, and they called it his clarity. The pen didn't tremble. The ink didn't smudge. It was just there, black and permanent, like the moment itself. That night I walked home slower than usual. The city was full of sound, traffic, music, laughter spilling from bars, but inside me, everything was silent. The kind of silence that doesn't mean peace, the kind that means decision. When I got home, I placed the notebook on my kitchen table. I poured a glass of water, sat down, and looked at the pages. 57 entries now. Facts, quotes, figures, emails, names. Each one a fragment of something I'd ignored. And as I flipped through them, I realized this wasn't just a record anymore. It was a story, one that had been told around me, over me, without me, but never by me. Until now. After the meeting, nothing seemed to change. And that was how I knew something had. People still said good morning. Jason still stopped by my desk to ask about our project. My manager still smiled like everything was balanced. But inside that routine, I began to build something else, a quiet kind of precision. I started small. I requested access logs for shared files. For data control, I said. No one questioned it. I downloaded old presentation drafts, backed up every version of every deck I'd built, every email thread that showed who sent what first. It didn't feel like collecting evidence. It felt like organizing the truth. Every night after work, I'd open my notebook on the kitchen table next to a small silver lamp. I'd rewrite key lines from emails, print attachments, tape them in. I started color-coding them. Yellow for quotes, blue for numbers, red for anything that sounded like praise that hid an omission. The notebook grew thicker, heavier, alive with quiet documentation. The more I wrote, the calmer I felt. It wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity, a kind I hadn't known in years. One evening, I found myself re-watching the video recording of that quarterly meeting. I'd requested it from the internal portal to review slides for next quarter. The camera was static, the sound grainy. Jason stood in front talking through my work. I let it play, and when my manager said, "Thanks to Anna for polishing," I paused the video. The exact moment. Frame by frame, I printed that still, the one where I'm sitting in the second row, hands folded, expression calm, and taped it to the inside cover of the notebook. Underneath it, I wrote, "This is the last time I stay seated." The next morning, I began timing things. Every project I worked on, I logged the hours. Every contribution, every shared folder, every meeting. I made sure each email I sent had a clean trail. Timestamps, CCs, attachments. I wasn't waiting for a fight. I was preparing for clarity. Weeks passed, and the notebook became something more than paper. It was a mirror, showing me patterns I'd ignored, timelines I could now see clearly. In 12 years, I'd been called steady 14 times, dependable 22, and creative only twice. The word I was most often given was the one they used to keep me still. By late April, HR sent an internal survey. Employee satisfaction, leadership and recognition. I filled it out completely. Not anonymously. I used my name. For the first time, I wrote exactly what I thought, in the same calm tone they'd trained me to use. Recognition doesn't require noise. It requires accuracy. That night, when I closed the notebook, I realized something. I didn't feel invisible anymore. Not because they finally saw me, but because I'd started seeing myself with evidence, not emotion. And for the first time, the silence around me didn't feel like absence. It felt like preparation. The first crack appeared in May. It was small, almost elegant, the kind of mistake that hides inside confidence. Jason had sent a report to the regional VP, the kind of document that decides budgets and bonuses. It looked polished, professional. Except for one thing, the numbers didn't match the database. They matched my draft. My old draft, the one I'd corrected 2 weeks earlier. The VP noticed. He replied to the entire thread, "Jason, please confirm which version you're using. The figures for segment C seem outdated." A quiet message. Public enough. Sharp enough. Jason's response came 15 minutes later. "Apologies. Must have pulled the wrong version. I'll check with Anna." I saw my name in that email, plain and clean. Just a single line. "I'll check with Anna." That was the sound of a man realizing he might need what he once took for granted. By noon, he was at my desk, holding a coffee cup he didn't mean to bring. "Hey," he said, his voice light. "Quick one. Could you send me the final sheet from last month?" I must have grabbed an older file. I looked up and smiled. "Of course. I'll send you the right one." What I didn't say was that I'd already done more than that. Every file I'd built in the last 6 months had a digital fingerprint. Version logs, timestamps, audit trails. I'd made sure of it. That night I wrote in the notebook, he used my numbers. They corrected him with mine. I drew a small circle around it. A soft collapse. No noise, no warning, just gravity. 2 weeks later, it happened again. Another report, another mismatch. This time, during a department review, the VP asked a question Jason couldn't answer, about metrics he claimed to have led. He stumbled, said he'd need to double-check with the analytics team. The room went silent. Everyone turned to me, just briefly, but long enough. I didn't say a word. I just nodded. After the meeting, my manager pulled me aside. "You've been working closely with Jason, right? Maybe help him tighten up his data flow before the next review." "Of course," I said. "Happy to help." That evening, I documented everything. The meeting notes, the time-stamped questions, his responses, even the tone shift in my manager's voice. The notebook was starting to feel like an extension of my memory, sharper than emotion, quieter than revenge. By June, the pattern was visible to everyone but Jason. The more he tried to sound certain, the more holes appeared in his certainty. And every correction led back to me. Every number, every file, every clean line of proof. People started asking me things directly again. Small things at first. "Anna, can you confirm this dataset? Or could you take a look at the new format?" Nothing dramatic, just a slow redirection of gravity. He still smiled in the hallway. Still called me team player. Still didn't realize the irony. The day I knew the collapse had begun for real was the day HR copied me on a message by mistake. A thread about data ownership protocol. My name was mentioned twice, as point of reference. Jason's was not. That night, I didn't write much. Just one sentence. He borrowed my silence. I took it back. And for the first time in months, I closed the notebook without feeling weight. By July, the balance had changed. Not loudly, but undeniably. I could feel it in the way people paused when I entered a room, the way questions began finding their way to me instead of around me. No one said it out loud, but I'd become the quiet answer to every uncertainty they couldn't name. It started with a simple email from the regional VP. "Anna, could you walk us through the metrics from last quarter in the next leadership sync? I'd like to hear it directly from you." Directly from me. 5 words. 12 years late, I didn't reply right away. I let it sit for an hour, maybe 2. Then I answered, "Happy to." That evening, I opened the notebook again. The black cover had grown soft with time, the edges feathered from use. Inside were months of notes, timelines, copies of emails, comments, and dates. It wasn't a collection anymore. It was a structure. A defense built out of precision. I rewrote my talking points by hand, calm, clear, unarguable. Facts. Every statement followed by a timestamp. Every claim followed by a file path. Every number matched to an original source. When the day of the meeting came, the room was full. Managers, analysts, the VP, even HR. Jason sat 2 seats away, his laptop open. His smile thinner than usual. The VP began. "Anna, take us through your section." I stood. The projector light hit the screen, clean white. I opened my folder and placed the black notebook beside it. Not for show, just for steadiness. I spoke slowly, clearly. I didn't explain. I didn't defend. I presented. Each chart, each report, each process. When a director interrupted with a question, I answered with data and context. When Jason tried to add something, I nodded, then clarified the correct detail, gently but precisely. Halfway through, the VP stopped taking notes. He was just listening. When I finished, there was a pause. Not uncomfortable, just full. The kind of silence that comes when everyone realizes they've been looking at something upside down. The VP leaned forward. Excellent work, Anna. This is exactly the level of transparency we've been missing. He turned to Jason. I'd like you to align your next report to Anna's structure. It's the cleanest analysis we've had this quarter. Jason smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Of course, he said. That was the moment the room quietly shifted. Not because I had won, but because truth had found its own gravity. When the meeting ended, people came over to thank me for the clarity. HR asked for a copy of my framework for internal documentation. My manager patted my shoulder. Too softly, too late. Jason didn't say much. He just packed his laptop slowly, as if trying not to make noise. When he passed me by, he nodded once, polite, practiced, empty. I nodded back. Because sometimes acknowledgement is enough to end a chapter. That night, I went home earlier than usual. The city lights blurred through the train window, streaks of white and gold moving faster than thought. I opened my bag and took out the notebook. Its edges were worn, the spine slightly cracked, the pages filled with months of quiet persistence. I flipped to a new page. Truth doesn't need applause. It just needs room. Then I closed it. It happened on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after that presentation. The email came from HR, subject, clarification meeting, data ownership review. I knew what it meant. They didn't say investigation, but they didn't need to. When I walked into the conference room, the air felt heavier, the kind that smells of printed reports and quiet panic. HR was there, my manager, the VP, and Jason, a neat half-circle of politeness. Thanks for joining, Anna, HR began. We've received a few questions regarding authorship of key analytics materials. We just want to ensure proper credit alignment. Proper credit alignment. That's how they name what shouldn't have needed a name. Jason spoke first. His voice was smooth, professional. There's been some misunderstanding. Anna and I collaborated closely. We share the same workflow. Sometimes files overlap, I let him finish. Then when the room fell quiet, I opened my folder. Inside was the black notebook, thick now, filled with evidence that didn't shout. I placed it on the table. I understand, I said softly. That's why I documented everything. For a moment, no one spoke. HR glanced at the VP, who leaned forward slightly. Go ahead, Anna. I turned to the first page. Each one was dated, neat, factual. I read out a timeline. Who created what file, when it was shared, when it was edited, and by whom. Each point was verified with logs, attachments, and screenshots. At first, Jason tried to interrupt. That's not exactly... But the VP raised his hand. Let her continue, so I did, calmly. When I finished, I slid a printed report across the table, the one Jason had submitted using my data. That's the old draft, I said. It still has my watermark in the corner. He looked down. His silence was the first honest thing he'd given in months. HR reviewed the pages slowly. The sound of paper turning was the only sound in the room. My manager cleared his throat once but didn't speak. Finally, the VP exhaled. This is clear. Thank you, Anna. We'll need to correct the record and adjust project credits accordingly. Adjust credits. Another clean phrase for something messy. Jason looked at me then. For a second, I saw something flicker. Not guilt, just realization. The understanding that silence can be a weapon, too, when it's in the right hands. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The meeting ended quietly. HR thanked me for my thoroughness. My manager avoided eye contact. Jason stayed seated as I left the room, staring at the notebook like it might still open itself. In the elevator, I finally let my shoulders drop. The metal doors reflected my face back at me. Calm, steady, almost peaceful. That night, I opened the notebook one last time. I turned to a blank page and wrote, Today, the truth didn't need to be defended. It just needed to be shown. Then I closed it. For the first time, it didn't feel heavy. A month later, the new company newsletter came out. Under Project Leadership Updates, my name appeared. Small, simple, printed in black. Lead analyst reporting systems, Anna Lopez, no speech, no apology, no grand announcement, just a correction, quiet, clean, permanent. Jason had been moved to another division to explore new opportunities. My manager avoided the topic. HR thanked me again for my professionalism through the process. I didn't frame the newsletter. I didn't keep it. I just read it once, folded it in half, and placed it inside the back cover of my notebook. The same notebook that once held questions, doubts, and proof. Now it held closure. That night, I cleaned my desk for the first time in years. I took home the small plant that had survived every office season, the chipped mug with the faded company logo and the black notebook. When I got home, I placed it on a shelf between two marketing textbooks, spine out, edges worn soft from my hands. For a moment, I just looked at it. It didn't look like evidence anymore. It looked like memory. In the end, it wasn't the numbers or the files that changed things. It was the act of writing, the decision to see clearly, and to keep seeing even when it hurt. Sometimes fairness doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives in documents, in proof, in the steady patience of someone who refuses to forget. I still use a new notebook now, not black, but gray, lighter. It's for new ideas, not injustices, but every time I open it, I remember the first page of the old one, 68,000 and 83,000. And I remember what those numbers gave me. Not anger, not revenge, but direction. If you've ever faced something like this, where your silence was mistaken for weakness, or your work for someone else's, tell me your story in the comments. I read everyone, because fairness doesn't shout, it stays. Like the video and subscribe to Office Revenge Files for more stories where women turn silence into power.